What's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here. And today we are back to discuss League of Legends esports with our new esports super goat and latest hire at DFS Army, my man, Advantage. What's up, man?
Not much. It's nice to be here. Esports is really popping right now, so it's good to get this out for anyone who has any questions and may not have prior knowledge to the game.
A lot of us don't have prior knowledge to the game. Absolutely. So what we're gonna do today is kind of go over some general strategy. I want you to give me an overview. Pretend I'm somebody who has no clue about anything to do with esports, League of Legends, and I want to understand how to read the notes, how to sort of build lineups, what lineup constructions work. So I really want to start from the beginning with the basics of esports, if you don't mind, in League of Legends.
Yep.
And the first thing I note is you have all these different little positions, right? Top, jungle, mid, ADC, and sup.
Yes.
Now, I've also noticed that a couple of these go for cheaper and seem to score fewer points than some of the other ones. So can you explain right off the bat what these words mean, this top, JNG, mid, ADC, and sup? Like, give me an idea. What does that mean?
Sure. So League of Legends, first of all, it's obviously a video game. It's played by two teams who have 5 players each, and they control characters. They're trying to take the enemy's base. That's how they win the game. And the way the map on the game is laid out, they have different lanes. So there's top lane, which is the position top. There's mid lane, the middle lane in the map, which is mid, obviously. Mm-hmm. And there's a bottom lane as well. So
and that is sup.
Yeah, bottom lane is taken by both the AD carry and the sup. So ADC and sup. And the jungler, the JNG, roams between the lanes to make plays for his team. So Those are the basic. That's the basic layout of what those positions mean. And as far as salary goes, the most valuable in terms of DraftKings and fantasy points, they are mid and AD carry. They're usually the players that have the most resources. They play champions, as they're called. They play champions that do a lot of damage. They're the ones that win the game for their team more often than not. So they'll pick up more kills. They'll pick up more CS, which is farm, which is gold, which counts for 0.02 for each one on DK.
Okay.
And support and top are lower priced because they are not the main carries. Usually they are supportive roles. So they will have games where they have really high scores, but most of the time they'll be lower on average than the other roles.
So what does a support and a top do? They're like hanging out by their like bases, trying to defend them rather than sort of attacking and scoring lots of points. Is that the difference?
Well, so they'll always be trying to defend their base if the other team is attacking, but the support sticks with the ADC and is trying to protect him and make sure he can get his resources, get his items to power him up throughout the game, and that will enable him. So that means the support doesn't get many kills and everything like that, but he'll tend to get a lot of assists with his AD carry because they're always together.
Okay.
Top lane is very much an island on League of Legends. It's still the same lane, but there's not a lot of focus there. They tend to just farm it out. They play tanks a lot of the time. Tanks are characters that don't die easily. So they will just support their team when they can.
Okay, so the top is like the worst, the lowest scoring, and that kind of fleshes itself out with when you look here at some of these average fantasy points scored in wins and losses. The top always does, and the top in support. Well, I'm just looking through your spreadsheet here, and I try to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at average fantasy points and points win and points in a loss, and it's pretty clear the top scores the fewest, followed by the support, right? So in this team here, the Wheeze, top fewest support. If I go over to Dominus, it looks like, again, top and support the least, with mid and junk. Well, of course, both these teams mid hasn't played or something because there's no scoring here, but looks like these middle spots score the most. Let's look at one that has all of them. Okay, in the case of this LGD, it looks like big scores from, again, these three middle rows, with the top and the bottom one being lower and certainly having lower salaries. And that seems to be the case across the board. Even just looking at these stats, like I'm looking at Invictus Gaming here, I can see that stats can be deceiving. This player probably only played in one game.
Yeah, he's only played in 3 games out of 10, so it's not the most reliable sample size, but it's who's playing today, so those are his stats.
Yeah. So we got to be careful about sample sizes a little bit here. Fantasy points, win, loss. Obviously, the second thing I'm seeing just on a brief glance of this sheet is that it appears that teams that win are scoring more than teams that lose.
Oh, yeah.
I'm also seeing some interesting phenomenon, and I'd love for you to get your take on this, where there are certain players who seem to score pretty well, win or lose, and I'm trying to get my head around that. Like, I'm looking at this Angel here, and something that one of our guys was saying was that, hey, for floor, I look at fantasy points and a loss and try to get the ones that score a lot. Is that a reasonable tactic, or is that something that you do or we should be doing?
It is something that's becoming more popular, but I wouldn't say it's the most optimal tactic, because in most games, when a team loses, they don't score very much. Like, in a 3-game set, if they lose 2-0, they might only score 10, 15 fantasy points, which is going to kill your entire lineup.
Yeah.
With these certain players that are scoring better in losses, they have typically played very close games. They have played longer games. Anything like that. I wouldn't say it's the norm, though. So those things, if extended over a longer season, I feel like they would drop down a little more.
Okay, that's fair. Because some of these are smaller sample sizes. Now, let's get back to strategy, and then we're going to get to some of the questions that are coming in from members here. Give us a second for that, guys. Patience, keep sending your questions in. I want to kind of get through the basics of strategy first, and then we'll jump into some questions. And then we'll talk about tonight's slate, which I'm purposefully avoiding a little bit because I want to understand the strategy of this game first and foremost, obviously. So my next question for you, stacking lineups. So it seems to me the other day we had a 2-game slate, right? Now this is a 3-gamer.
Yeah.
On the 2-gamer, my strategy was like, all right, there was one team that was massively favored, and I was like, all right, let's use 3 or 4 from that team and then use 3 or 4 from each of the other 2 teams, sort of mix and match. But without mixing them up. In other words, just 2 teams, nothing else, right? Just players from 2 teams, and then picking one of those teams as the team that wins. Is that pretty much the accepted approach to how to attack these contests?
That is what I believe to be the most optimal strategy. You'll want to focus on the winning teams more so than individual players in League DFS. So you want even those players that are scoring better, like Angel, for example. If you pick them and they lose the match, most likely they won't score well. So you want to focus on the teams who win, even if the player might have lower stats than their counterpart. It's just a matter of getting that win, and that is typically the optimal way to play it.
Okay, so essentially what we're doing is figuring out with each lineup, picking a couple teams that we think will be the winners, and then just loading up on those players. Like I see here, Invictus Gaming is minus 800. If I got a minus 800 team and they have like a cheap Lian or whatever, I guess this guy is cheap because he had only that one game and he sucked in it.
Yeah, right? He is pretty cheap tonight yet.
And he's super cheap. Like, is that a tournament play? Like, how does that work? Because you can't get many JNGs for 6,600. Oh, actually, no. Wait a minute. That is a cheap position group. So you know what? Forget what I said. It looks like that position group is actually less expensive. So JNG, is JNG as much of a scorer as the mid and the ADC, or am I missing something here?
Typically, they are behind both mid and ADC, but on certain teams, for example, if you look at LGD there, Peanut is a big factor, and he is one of their main reasons for winning, so he might score a little more than mid and AD carry.
And he's
But in
cheap.
general, they will be ranked below mid and AD carry.
See, this is fascinating, this peanut thing, because here, what you're saying here, and I guess is KP percentage, does that indicate like how good someone is?
It can. KP percentage indicates, for example, if LGD were to get 10 kills and Peanut had a percentage of 70, then he would participate in 7 of those kills. So get a kill or assist on 70% of his team's kills.
So he's essentially, what that's telling us is he's a good scorer for his team. Like, he is involved in the action.
Yep. Typically higher is very relevant. Yeah.
Which is why it's green, which was brilliant in your construction.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Green, good. Red, bad.
Green, good. Red, bad.
Simple. Easy All right,
stuff.
now I want to ask about, before we jump over to today's slate, I want to ask about strategy for the captain position. And I need to understand it, because a lot of times if I take one of these 8K guys, it seems like the salaries for this thing, for this game, are very precise, because a lot of the salaries are very similar across all the different position groups. And if I throw an 8K in the captain spot a lot of the time, I almost just can't quite fit a lineup together, right? It's really constricting. Yeah. So what are we doing in the captain spot? Is the accepted approach just, hey, throw the best guy in there? Let's put Puff in there and that's it. You know, like tonight, even though he's 8,200, we throw Puff in there. He always scores massively, kind of thing. Or are we looking for some other scenario for the captain spot beyond like throw the best player from the best odds team in there, 8K, and try to figure it out the rest? Like doing B was the other night, right? I remember on this FPX team. Now, you know, is he like the GOAT of all ESports, or that was just the other night? Like, how does it work?
Well, first of all, yeah, he's an incredible player. He's one of the best players in the world, especially. So, yeah, he's good. But to answer your question, like I said before, it's more a focus on the teams in particular than the individuals. So if you want Puff, for example, he is very expensive. So if you stuff him in captain, you don't have much room for anything else. And that usually means you're either pairing that lineup with an underdog, which is cheap and will allow you to fit whoever you want. But if you want 2 favorites, which is often what happens in an optimal strategy, you want 2 favorites that are maybe priced well. Most of the time, you will not be able to get a mid or an 80 carry as your captain, even though they're the most valuable spot.
So essentially, let's look at this slate for a second.
Sure.
Invictus Gaming, FPX, both massive favorites.
Right.
So if I'm planning on stacking Invictus Gaming and FPX, these 2 teams, these 2 massive favorites,
yes, essentially
I'm going to have to suck it up and like throw a jungle or some other position, maybe a top of, I'm just looking at the scoring, like maybe a top, like the Shy, who's been pretty decent as a top scorer. Take the savings there so I can afford to squeeze in all these 7, 8Ks in the mid and ADC sections to make the whole thing work. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's the right line of thinking, because even most of the time, if they're 2 favorites, you won't be able to get the jungle role as a captain because they're slightly more expensive than top and support. Most of the time, you might be able to squeeze them in, but it's hard to. I think tonight it is possible, but I haven't tinkered too much just yet. But
that's just because the Lian discount. Is a Lian like a guy who sucked in his first game and only played a couple of matches? Is this guy a danger to be swapped out during the match?
He's played 3 games out of 10 this year, and
that doesn't sound very good.
It's not. They usually switch them in and out, so. For him specifically, it's not that he plays bad. I think that his team plays too good, even, so that they don't get to rack up kills and they end the game too quickly. But he is a sub risk when only playing 3 out of 10 games. Invictus is known to swap their junglers around, so it is a risky play if you put him in.
Okay, and now let me just jump back over to this more competitive game here.
Sure.
And so you had said just a minute ago that like sometimes the team's so good that they just kind of roll through the other team so fast. There's not as many kill opportunities, and actually they crush, but there's less scoring opportunity. So
Right.
I'm seeing here a minus 800 and a minus 700 favorite. And then there's a game here that looks pretty close odds. So how frequent is it that like two crapola teams like we and Dominus play each other and wind up scoring massively just because both teams aren't that good, which opens up, and I have no clue. I'm asking I have no idea of the answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, do we want to target a game like this for longevity? And like, hey, it's going to be a long game, back and forth, and lots of kills and lots of scoring opportunities. Is that a thing?
It is very real. Like last night, JDG beat BLG 2-0. So they even got the player bonus for sweeping them, but they still scored less than other teams that went 2-1 just because those games were more competitive and they allowed for more fighting and kills on both sides.
Wow.
So it's not always about, we have to look for the sweep, but you want to look for games that both teams like to fight and both teams fight often. So even in a 2-1 without the player bonus, it can outscore a 2-0 if it's the right situation.
What about the loser in that situation?
In that type of situation, the loser actually usually does pretty good. They'll score more than normal because it goes to a rather competitive 3-game set. But still, they'll take 2 losses, and those 2 losses can end up being quite detrimental.
Is there a negative points associated with losing?
Not necessarily.
Or positive points associated with winning?
For team spots, there are. If you in your team spot in your lineup, you will get a +2 bonus if your team wins. There's nothing for losing, but you'll get less objectives and you'll get less overall team score if your team loses twice compared to winning twice, obviously.
Okay.
And as far as players goes, in losing games, you'll die more, and dying is obviously a negative score. So
I didn't know. That's not obvious. I'm just now discovered. You just told me that, and it's the first time I knew that.
Yeah, so
Nothing
dying, you get a -1.
Nothing is obvious. I have no idea how scoring happens. All right. So losing is bad, and you get a minus. Killing someone, good. You get a plus.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Now, let's dive into this slate specifically. And I'm going to jump over to... I'm going to kind of open up your notes here. And let's get a look here. So, game 1. Game-by-game notes. DMO versus WE, with WE as the slight -200 favorite. So on these notes, you're bolding your favorite players from this team. So if I'm choosing to go with DMO, I'm probably going to want to play 3 of them, right? Because maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, it depends what kind of stack you're building. There's stacks where you only have 2 from one team, stacks where you have 4, and some where you have 3. So there's different ways to go with it. Yeah.
And you write sub-risk high, meaning there's a reasonably high chance that this player will be subbed out at some point during the game.
Correct. Yeah. That player in particular, Shie, is a starting mid laner at this point. He's announced starting, but his substitute has played quite a few games as well. So if they happen to lose a game, there's a good chance he could get moved out.
Brutal. That's brutal if you're GA.
Yeah, and obviously you don't want to roster someone like that because their score's done after that.
Yeah, totally. So when they get subbed out, disaster. All right, the comments are funny. I'm not going to get to them yet, but they're funny. What's coming in? All right. Now you have a guy bolded with a star. Star is like a core play for you. That's a guy that, hey, if I'm playing this team, this guy is my guy, and I might want to use him as a captain. Like a star, indicate a captain-worthy player.
Stars can be captains. They're the players with the most impact. They're the players who I think will perform the best on that certain team. So usually those stars are like my sort of core sections.
Okay, but only if I'm using this team. Like if I think we is going to win, I don't want to pay up for Gala.
Exactly.
So this is only, you want to play players from the team that you're predicting to win. We don't want to pay up for them. Okay. Now, flip side, let's see. We as the favorite here.
Yes.
So if we play we, you've got these two players bolded, Bishang and Jiu Meng. So either one of those would be potentially captain worthy with Morgan and Missing coming in there, and then beware of this one with the high sub risk. That the general understanding of how to read this.
Yes, that's pretty much spot on.
Damn, no wonder
so hard, right?
No wonder I've been cashing esports. Like I'm just trying to figure out anything. I'm like, fuck, I don't know how I just made money tonight, but I did. I don't know. Yeah. All right. So next matchup, we've got IG, massive favorite, taking on LGD. Minus 800, for those who don't know, is very, very high. Essentially, this is giving them close to a 90% chance of winning this matchup. So when it's a lock win, what's my downside on loading up on this team? Is it just that they might smash these guys to the point where they just don't accumulate as many points as these two mediocre teams might accumulate?
That is definitely an option, as we saw last night. You have to really pick your spots. It's not always, they're 800 favorites, I have to play 4 of them. It's not that simple. But in this case, you have to look team by team as well. IG is a team that does tend to fight a lot, so even if they 2-0, there should be a lot of action going on.
You can tell a little bit by the average fantasy points. Like what's the best measure here? The average fantasy points per game, fantasy points in a win. These things, like I'm looking at, FPX, and they seem to do really well in wins, better than IG. I don't know why that would be. Like, and here's this LGD. They crush in wins, but they ain't winning this one, so that's unfortunate. Like, how do I use the fantasy points in a win to understand like what's likely to happen? And again, should we be factoring in massive favorites? As there's that risk that they just smash this opponent.
Right. Yeah. Both of those are important. One thing I will point out that is a good measure on that chart is under the team section, they have kills per win, they have deaths per loss, and those are the two important ones when looking at potentially how aggressive or passive a team is. So if you see
where is this?
Oh, it's just above the players, like in the sub categories.
Kills per win,
yeah.
Deaths per loss. So explain what that means. What that means exactly.
Sure. So it is a team statistic. So that is an on average every time that Fun Plus Phoenix wins a game, they get 18 kills a game. Or if they lose, then they die 21 times a game. It's that kind of measure. And that's more important than general stats because they can get a little mixed if you just add in kills per game, not kills per win. So it's good to have the win stats and loss stats there. It shows how often they die and how often they kill.
Interesting. Now I'm all right. So I wasn't even looking at those numbers because it all seemed really confusing.
Yeah.
But now that I'm looking at them and you're explaining them, I totally get it. Now, all right, let me ask you a couple questions then on brief look. Kills per win, deaths per loss. Team kill to death ratio. Is that not a measure? I guess the lower this is, the better that team is overall.
So that's actually the opposite. The lower is, it's not a good thing because what that stat entails is it's an average of their kills and deaths.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So yeah, if it's a higher ratio, then that means they kill more for every death. And if it's lower, that means they die more for every, they get less kills for every death. That's just
how come some of these garbage teams have really high ratios? Like, we 4 and 6 has a 3.1 ratio, whereas and IG, which is the GOAT, only has a 1.8.
That speaks to a lot of their opponents, even because when WE is beating down the worst teams in the league, they get to really rack up their kills and boost that ratio. If they have closer games, like IG's had a lot of close games this year. Most of the time they're not dominating. Last slate they did, but most of the time it's been pretty close. So they don't just run away with the game in that sense. So they can't stat pad, essentially.
But we expect them to crush these scrubs over at LGD, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
They're going to smash these dudes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm learning is, it's messed up. What I'm learning is that we don't just want to take the biggest favorite here, but rather we want to find a winning team that will probably actually be out there a little bit longer, rack up more kills, not just go in and completely smash their opponent because there's just not enough time in that scenario for them to rack up the amount of score we really need to win a tournament. Is that the general guideline that you would say? Like, am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, that's pretty close to correct. In LPL, especially the league we're playing, there is a lot of fighting. So usually the situation where someone gets steamrolled without much killing, it doesn't happen that often. In leagues like North America and Korea, they play slower games and they can just completely wipe you out with no fighting whatsoever oftentimes. But in China, they fight like animals a lot of the time. They just go in after back-to-back losses. It doesn't matter. They just keep fighting. So
interesting. Just a personality of the players and style of play.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right. I had some other questions. I want to talk about what the hell was I going to talk about? Now I totally forgot. I just want to talk again about the strategy of throwing different players in the captain spot. So for all intents and purposes, you got to look at what fits together and try to get the highest scorers in the captain. I mean, I don't know any other way to do it. Try to get a high scorer that maybe doesn't cost as much into that captain spot so we can squeeze a team of pretty good players in across the board. Like if I thought LGD had a shot, I'd be all about Peanut and his 42 points per win and the 77% ratio as a captain, like if these guys were favored. But since they're going to get smashed, we pretty much want to avoid these guys. And would the strategy tonight be to kind of like mix one of Team We or Team Dominus in with either IG or FPX as opposed to trying to load up on these two teams?
Right, so that's where it comes into where lineup construction comes into play. The first game is a very close game where it's like if you pick the wrong side, then you're not going to do well with that lineup. So it's hard to rely on, say, Dominus to win the game. But if you get that correct, there will be more upside than if you were to stack Invictus and Fun Plus, because since Dominus is so cheap, you can fit a better captain into your captain spot.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Dominus in there and this Gala character and they win, and this guy puts up a good score, which 36 fantasy points per win, average, like that's as much as that's pretty much good. Anyone. Yeah, very strong. So and even this Xiaopeng guy as well. So between these two, like if you're stacking this team and they win, then you could just load up on studs from either one of these other two teams and you'll be good to go.
Correct.
All right, so let's jump over to some questions that we've been getting in here from some of the folks watching, some of the members. I'm going to throw them at you. I hope you can see this as well. But first question from Plex. He's asking, can I have a top at captain? And is the top spot a good spot for captain? We covered this a little bit, but why don't you kind of hit me with that again? Top scores a little bit less than all of the other positions you had mentioned?
Yeah, so top and support are usually the lowest scoring positions, but if you think that both favorites are worth picking and are going to dominate or get a lot of kills, top is fine because it allows you to fit in all the studs that you may want from the heavy favorites. Obviously, it comes at a cost of a cheaper captain, but it lets you fit in more of the winning players from the more favored teams.
I like it. Okay, Donnie Springfield has a really good question, and this comes off of when you were talking about how the support supports the ADC.
Correct, yeah.
So Donnie asks, should we stack ADC and support as a standard approach? Because since he's supporting him, he should be getting assists, and they should maybe go together. Is that a thing?
Yep, there's a really good correlation between the ADC and the support, obviously, because they stick together almost the entire game. In most cases, you will want to pair a high-scoring ADC with their support. But obviously, if substitutes and whatnot are a factor, then you might want to avoid that situation.
There we go. And BDOS asked the same question, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I will acknowledge BDOS and ask the same question. All right. Eric Hoffman. He wants to know if you feel that light should be moved to LGBT after last night's performance. Now, I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the terminology here, so I think I'm not sure that this is even a real question. Now that I looked at it, what? Damn it, Eric Hoffman. The hell are you talking about? All right, forget that one. Sorry, I thought that was another team. LGB. I totally messed that one up. All right. The Rev Royus is asking, why is FPX so favored when? And this is true. Like, all right, this is a good question. The Rev Royus, why is FPX so favored when on paper it seems like SN statistically, and this is true, SN statistically here looks better. So why this team, and I think I know the answer, but why is this team that with a 3.7 kill to death ratio, all these great kills per win, lots of dragons per game. I don't even know what dragons are, but what are dragons?
Dragons are a neutral objective in the game, and whenever a team captures one or kills one, their team spot gets 2 points.
Okay, so points for teams per game. Their team scores a lot with those, and lots of barons per game. What are barons per game?
It's also a neutral objective, similar to dragons. It gives 3 points instead of 2, though, because it's a bigger one. Yeah.
So it's little extras that they get, and also the kill percentages and the what's KDA again? Kill, death, assist.
Yeah.
So
kill, death,
that's
assist
ratio.
Yeah.
And higher is better.
Yes.
So these guys all have really high numbers, like even compared to Fun plus Phoenix. So the question from Rev Royus is why is this the case that one team is better than the other? I think I know the answer. I'm going to try to field it, and you tell me if I'm right.
Sure.
Is that because these guys have just been playing scrubs and padding up their statistics by beating up on garbage teams, and so now they're facing a better team, so we can't like just fully believe the stats? Is that kind of what's going on here?
That's actually not fully true for Suning. They have been a pretty good team this year. Like they've beaten some quality opponents. They've also lost to some questionable ones, but they have played some very good games. Getting into the question, the reason why Fun plus Phoenix is so favored is, first of all, the general consensus, the general opinion is that Fun plus is one of the best teams in the world. They won the World Championship last year, and they are known by name as one of the most dominant teams in the LPL at this time. So that's one thing. That's one part of why they're so favored. And the next is, I think Fun Plus they'll be able to figure out Suning here. And Suning, their stats are so inflated and they look so good on paper because they figured out a very dominant strategy on this patch. The game goes through different cycles, like it gets updated, things get better and worse.
Mm-hmm.
Suning has figured out a very strong strategy in their last couple games, which has really, really improved their overall statistics compared to before that.
Ooh.
And that's why you see such high numbers, because they've just demolished their last two opponents, quality opponents. They've demolished them with this new strategy.
They put Bibu on support and Janna in the top lane, right? So
yeah.
Now Bibu is listed as a top here.
Correct.
And they don't even have Janna playing in this one. They got Sword Art playing.
Well, Janna, sorry to interrupt, but Janna is a champion pick. It's like it's one of the characters that they'll select in the game.
Oh, okay. Janna's one of the characters.
Yeah.
Mid laner. It's a lot of words that I don't understand. Area of effect. Extra support allows destroy. So they've come up with some sort of a strategy in the current version of the game.
Yes.
And so without knowing too much, what this is telling me is what if FPX doesn't kind of figure that out, or they kind of still get overwhelmed by the strategy? Is this a spot for a potential off on the betting odds scenario where, FPX gets this sort of name recognition, massive boost because everybody knows they're the champs, and so it's kind of like when a big name fighter is fighting, even though they might be declining or old, they always get that boost of the name value, right on the odds makers. But rather, maybe they're underestimating this sort of lesser known team that's been on fire. And maybe does that make for an interesting spot for a potential upset is where I'm going.
I do think it is a possibility. Like I mentioned in the notes under there, I said if Suning gets all their champion picks, they get that strategy, they have a good chance, I think, to overwhelm Fun Plus Phoenix, even though Fun Plus Phoenix is a better team toe-to-toe. There is there is a ban system in the game where you can eliminate certain picks from the other team before the game starts. So that's what I'm thinking FPX will do. They'll notice, because they can tell that Suning have been on fire, hopefully, and they know what's the catalyst for that. So if they eliminate those picks on a toe-to-toe standing, Fun Plus Phoenix is a much better team than Suning. But
so if they figure out they have to ban the Janna.
And they get rid of the Janna. There's other picks that are important to that comp, like Jarvan and Kassadin, stuff like that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So potential for an upset, and pay attention to the banning ceremonies before the game starts to see if FPX has this thing figured out or not. Or maybe they want to sack up and go mano a mano against this new strategy and see if they're they could just take them out. Did anybody ever do that or no?
Yeah, that's possible too. A lot of times teams will have a certain power pick or strategy that works well for them, and a good team will just take it on the chin and try to go through it and learn how to beat it that way instead of banning it.
We'll let him take Janna, and let's see if we could take him out. Let's see if these guys have what it takes to take us out using their new hoity-toity strategy. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I love a cheat code strategy like that. Like now I'm a fan of Suning for figuring that like that. I love what you just described. That I love that in a game.
Yeah, it adds different ways for teams that would normally probably just lose to get a leg up on better teams. So
yeah, using a trick strategy. Like, again, I don't play this game that much. I played today. I tested it out. I wanted to learn. Playing some League of Legends. Got a lot more to learn, but
it's a long way to go, right?
Yeah, there we go. So that's really interesting. All right, let me see if there's any other questions. You have to pick a team lineup. What is he saying? Jason, you have to pick a team in lineup construction. It seems the winners always score the same. Is it worth paying up? Is there a ceiling on the team selection? And what should we use in terms of a statistic to help with our team selection?
That's a good question. Most of the time teams are capped around like the 65, 60 range in terms of fantasy points. So I don't think most of the time it is not optimal to get the highest paying team. If you're picking, for example, if you were to pick DMO on this Slate Dominus, their team is a lot cheaper than Fun Plus Phoenix or IG, but they'd score about the same if they win. So you'd want to focus on that and then maybe stack up more on the IG players or Fun Plus Phoenix players.
So for all intents and purposes, the team that wins is going to score. The teams that win score well.
Yes.
And if I'm going to bother going with an underdog team like Dominus, I might as well use their team as well, get that advantage, and be able to load up on studs in all the other positions. So if I'm pairing up Dominus with IG, I'm able to really kind of afford an extra 1,000 by using this team versus the Invictus Gaming, the IG team, and so on and so forth. So team's going to score the same anyway, or very similar. Yeah. And so at that point, you might as well use the cheaper one of the stacks that you have in your lineup. Is that about right?
Yes. There is a bit of a league distinction again between different regions, but for the LPL, for Chinese purposes, they all score very, very similar.
Now, Taco is saying that I was 1v9ing in my League of Legends game. What does that mean? Because I was just out there getting killed like every 2 seconds.
Okay, well, typically a 1v9 situation is you're the one, and you're doing really good. You're the main man, the carry, and your teammates all suck. So your 4 teammates are basically playing for the other team. So that ends up being a 1v9 situation.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure I was not 1v9. That's not what was going on. I'm pretty sure my teammates all quit once they saw that I was on their team, and then I was 1v4ing, just getting killed every 2 seconds. All right.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't 1v9ing. Okay. Very good. Listen, advantage, this was good. I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. I never thought I would do a podcast and video talking about League of Legends and esports, and I got to tell you something. I'm now not even just sucking it up and playing it because I'm degenning. I like it now. I'm now a fan. Will I watch it? Probably not, but maybe. I'm not ruling it out. I could see. I haven't watched a basketball game all year, so it's nothing against esports.
Yeah, you don't have to watch it. It's not for everybody, that's for sure. But the theory behind it, the game theory, the lineups and stuff, it's really interesting stuff. I
am fascinated, and I really, really like this idea of pairing up one of these super stud winners with one of these 2 teams. Is that what people are going to do, or should be doing tonight, or should we try to squeeze IG and FPX together?
It just depends on the person. I feel the higher upside lineup is obviously a mega favorite with one team from that game, because just the salary savings will allow you more. But in cash games or maybe single entries, if people don't know which side to pick on that game, because if you pick wrong, you're going to lose. If you don't know what side to pick, then you can double stack IG and Fun Plus.
And just lock in hopefully winners and hope that my theory of Suning upsetting Fun Plus doesn't happen. And
exactly.
If I were a sharp gambler, and I am, and somebody said to me, "Hey, I want to stack Suning because I think they could pull off the upset," my response to them would be, "Well, if you think they can pull off an upset, you might want to just bet it at 4x, 400, at plus 400." So
it's really good value. Yeah.
Yeah. There's that. Now, Jordan Kane is asking, are there any other correlation stacks? So I want to talk about a couple that we've already covered. I don't know, Jordan, when you popped in, but Advantage already said that ADC and SUP are good to stack with one another.
Correct. Yes.
We've already talked about how we want to choose the team of one of our stacked lineups. But my next question would be, are there any other players to stack besides SUP and ADC? Like, does jungle go with mid, or there's nothing else like that? Like, should we try to, is there any other situation like that where we're trying to stack 2 position groups, or no, it's just the SUP and the ADC? Or like I said, are jungle, mid, or top, are any of those correlated in any way outside of the general correlation of teams with one another on the players in the same team?
So like you mentioned, ADC and SUP are probably the biggest correlation because they're together almost all game. The next one, there is another one. It's not as deep as ADC and support, but it is the jungle and the mid combo. As I mentioned before, the jungle roams the map, makes plays with the rest of his laners. And top is usually an island, as I also said, so they typically leave that alone. So they'll focus on mid, which is a more impactful role, and also on bottom. But usually jungle and mid, they have a lot of roams. They move together. They hit each other's lane, stuff like that. So that would be the second one.
That was unexpected. So I'm so learning right now. These are things like Taco's out there talking about, like, obvious, like as if everybody knew it. He's like, "Oh yeah, you used to always stack the mid in the jungle. What are you talking about?" I don't fucking know. All right. How the fuck would I know? All right, hold on. All right, I have some more questions. These are great questions, guys. I appreciate them coming up. All right, Sean is asking, is it optimal to put a one-off as a captain? So is there ever a time when, let's say I'm stacking IG, I'm stacking DMO or we, but I'm like, you know what? I still like Fun Plus, and my boy doing B is no joke. I'm just going to slap him as a captain spot and then stack these other 2 teams. Like, is there ever really a time when that's a sharp move, or is that something we shouldn't do?
I wouldn't say you shouldn't do it, but I typically do not. Most of the lineups as I've played esports DFS, the winning lineups are a 2-team stack. They're not a mix and match type of situation. That the reason being is because when you play a stack of one team, they're usually going to all correlate together very well. And sometimes there might be the odd man left out, but usually you want that full team synergy because if you're banking on that game as a high kill game, for example, you don't want to miss out on someone putting up a big score just because you want it to fit in someone with slightly better stats or something like that. It has worked before though, having a one-off. You have to get the conditions have to be right. Like the games have to both be usually high kill. The person you picked has to be involved very well. And also, since you're not stacking the rest of his team, his teammates don't have to score that great. So there's a lot of conditions for it to work, but it can really differentiate your lineups if you do go that route.
This was awesome, man. I really appreciate it's just a lot of information, and I learned so much just now.
Yeah, it's
about this. It's really key. It's hard to understand it when you just look at a sheet like this, right? Without a description and even some write-ups. Without it, this is funny. I figured it out just on my own the other day. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to stack because it was only 2 games. So you had to basically stack 2 teams. But now what I've learned is even in a 3-game slate, and is it pretty typical that these slates max out at 3 games? Or there's sometimes like 5 or 10-game slates? Does that ever happen?
In the LPL right now, we're going to probably be sticking around 2 to 3. More leagues are opening up soon. So like the LCS, which is North America, there's multiple leagues opening up soon. They have 5 games or 6 games or 4 games. They'll have different size slates, but there will be best of 1s, not a best of 3 like in LPL.
Oh, okay, interesting. So for the matter of timing, essentially each game seems to take half an hour, and so you really don't want to have more than 3 hour-and-a-half potential games.
Yeah.
And do you ever sleep? Is this a thing where we are supposed to stay up all night? When do I go to sleep?
I mean, if you're brave, just hit the sack, see what happens in the morning, see if there's green or not. But I tend to like to watch the games personally.
Oh my goodness!
Until I fall asleep.
You don't sleep.
I get like 4 or 5 hours most of the time.
Yeah, you're a sick person. You're my kind of guy, and I like you more and more just hearing this chat. And now that I find out you don't sleep, we have a lot in common. So that's great. My kind of guy. Thank you for doing this. I'm excited. We'll do more of these, or maybe my boy Taco will jump on with you once in a while and do some of these as well, so he can actually have some knowledge instead of some schmuck who played League of Legends once to try to prep for this discussion. And I will be playing this regularly. I'm excited for it. I played it last night. I played it the night before. Cash. And that was like, oh my God, I made money playing something. So that was really cool. Thank you for the awesome notes. Yeah. And more to come, guys. So DFS Army members, if you're watching this and you haven't found the esports League of Legends information, you see right here, there's a little tab on the website. You click on esports VIP spreadsheet. Here's a little button for esports strategy. You can read up on some strategy there. And notes are posted in DFS Army Slack in the esports news and notes channel right here. Esports discussion happening here nonstop. So lots to do, lots to talk about. We're keeping our DFS itch scratched, and we're going from people who reluctantly played esports the last few days because there's nothing else to do to people who really like it and dominate that shit and crush it just like we fucking crush NASCAR and PJ and every other damn niche sport. And DFS, it's about time we crush some esports too, man, and I love it.
Yeah, there's some big winners last night, big money. So
$10,000 winner. Same guy won 10 and then 5, and I'm jealous. I'm like
crazy stuff.
My score was way worse than his, so I wasn't. I didn't care. I looked at I was like, I got a 524. It was good enough to cash.
Yeah.
But my man put up like a 597, 10K. It's awesome. All right, Advantage. Thank you for doing this, everybody. No more questions, guys. Thank you for all the questions. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully we're going to get out and crush some esports tonight. And my man Brendan Dozier was in here. That was like the most heartening thing ever. This is what a podcast can be. You learn a little bit. You learn about the slate. You learn about the sport a little bit. Learn about a little bit of strategy. and hopefully we put it all together tonight and load up on Suning for the underdog special.
That's the big balls move right there.
Where's Bobby Clinks, man? 100% that dude is all about Suning tonight. 100%. All right. Good stuff. Ending it here. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Advantage.
Yeah.
Let's do this.